All right, can everybody hear me? All right, let's get that little move there. All right, thank you for that introduction, Carson. All right, so today I am going to be covering Introduction to Angular. What is Angular? So obviously I ripped this off of Wikipedia. Angular is a JavaScript-based open-source front-end web application framework mainly maintained by Google and by a community of individuals and corporations to address many of the challenges encountered in developing single-page applications. So, translation, you can do everything that I'm about to show you with vanilla JavaScript, and that's how people have been doing it for couple decades. But we have developed a way to make those processes easier because working with the DOM, that's the document object model that you'll see on the screen whenever you pull up your web page, can be a little bit complicated when it comes to using vanilla JavaScript. So tools like Angular make our lives easier. All right, so this is just a quick intro to what will and will not be covered. This is a very, very basic introduction into what is a huge framework. My purpose, my goal today is not to overwhelm anybody. My goal is to prep you for the future talks that we will be having on Angular. So I'm just going to kind of ease you into it. Today is Training Wheels Day. So what we will be covering will be the Angular CLI, which I will get into in just a minute. How to set up your first application, so how to really dig in there and actually get started on your first application. Enough TypeScript to get by, and I'll explain what TypeScript is as well. Interpolation, property binding, event binding, and directives. And if those sound really scary, don't worry, trust me, I will explain them and they will not be as scary as you think they are. What will not be covered, but what I'm hoping will be covered in the future from what I've talked with the future speakers, will be observables, services, routing, and intermediate TypeScript. And the reason for that is because those are so much more outside of the scope of this particular talk. So, without further ado, I will get started. All right, so first is the Angular CLI. What is the Angular CLI? Again, Wikipedia, my favorite, says that Angular CLI is a command line interface to scaffold and build Angular apps using Node.js style common modules. So, translation with that for that would be, is it makes building stuff easier. So as I've already been stated a couple of times today, Angular is huge. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and it can be very intimidating to set up. So Angular has, in their infinite wisdom, created a tool that goes ahead and builds it for you. It takes a lot of that, a lot of the things that make it difficult to set up Angular, and it does it for you. So I'm going to go ahead and launch into how to install and get Angular CLI set up on your computer. All right, so how to install the Angular CLI. There is a tool on your computer called the command line. And I've got iTerm set up here, but you can use your normal terminal that's available to you on the Mac. Windows also has one, but for today I'm using a Mac. So bear with me if it looks a little different to you and you're used to seeing a Windows command line. This is where you would type in the command npm install -g at angular/CLI, which I've got up here on the screen. Now, this course, while it is basic, is also kind of understanding that you do have a little bit of JavaScript already. So if you haven't seen npm, If you're getting into JavaScript, I promise you, you will see it a lot. NPM is, it stands for Node Package Modules. And that is what a lot of JavaScript developers use off of something called Node.js, which you can install on your computer. You just go to, let's see, I'll just pull it up real quick, Node.js. Just go here, click on one of these, download them, depending on your, computer. Wait, yep. And you can just go ahead and npm install once you've got that installed there. So, all right. Now, once you have the CLI downloaded or installed, which will take you approximately 5 to 10 minutes, it's pretty huge. What you can do from there is you can start immediately building apps. One of the commands that you can do to start this is ng-new. And so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that for you. So let's go ahead and pull up the command line. All right, so I'm in my root directory, so I'm just going to make a new one. We'll call this presentation. We're going to make a directory here. I'm going to go into that directory that I just created. And I'm going to go ahead and create an application inside that. So let's go ahead and create a new application. All right, and done. Hey, congratulations. You just made an Angular app. All right, so let me go ahead and explain a little bit more about this. All right, so here I have pulled up the app that we just created. There's a lot of files in here. I'll go ahead and tell you which ones you can ignore. So you can ignore this one right here for now. We don't need this for your basics for your first starting an application in Angular. You will need eventually, but for now, we're just going to skip this. Node modules. You don't really need to worry about this one until you start including in third-party modules or third-party libraries. All you really need to focus on here is your source folder. So I'm going to open that up. And inside your source folder, your app folder right here, this is where your application is going to be housed. So, well, this is where your application is housed before it's compiled, but this is really all you need to care about. So now I'm going to show you some options that you have, and I will go on more on that subject in a little bit, but now I'm going to show you some options you have with ng-new. All right, so ng-new has several different options that you can give it. You can give it different flags. You can give it like a minimal flag to give you the barest Angular application. You can give it a flag to take out all testing if you wanted to. But this is just some extra stuff that the Angular developers added to the CLI to make it that much more powerful. So what do I mean by flags? So this right here, oh, oops, it went forward. This right here is a flag. It's just an option that you can add to your command that you're executing to give it, to add more, I guess in this case, more options. So like when I say options, I mean like here we're trying to add some options for some pre-compiled CSS. So a lot of JavaScript developers, front-end developers nowadays are moving away from just working in CSS, and they're working in more powerful CSS pre-compiled libraries like SCSS, Sass, and less. So it's instead of having to go through all of the effort of setting it up yourself, which it's not that difficult, but it is kind of a little tedious, and you do have to track it down on Google. You can go ahead and just create your application out of the box with one of these precompiled options. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just do that for you so you can see what I mean. So let's go ahead and create a new app, and we're going to call this ng-new my sassy app. And we're going to say -- style. And then I'm going to choose SCSS because that is what I'm most comfortable with. All right, and now let's open it up and see what happened. All right, so here we go. We have the same looking setup, but when you go down into your source file and you go into your application file, you will see that our styles, whereas previously it was vanilla CSS, is now SCSS. All right. Now, moving on from there. All right, next, we have ng-build and ng-serve. All right, so everything that is written in Angular, so let me go ahead and pull up my original Angular app here, is kind of done in something of a, that's the testing file, there we go. So this is not typical, this is not written in typical JavaScript. This is written in something that's called Typescript, which is, it compiles into JavaScript, but it's not actually JavaScript. It looks a lot like JavaScript. But really what it is it's a super-powered language basically superimposed over JavaScript that gives it static types and gives it extra abilities that haven't been already added in for the current ES5. So it gives you a little bit extra, so you can use async await and stuff like that. So in order to build those files, in order to make them be from TypeScript, as you can see right here with the .ts files, to turn them from TypeScript into JavaScript, what you need is ng-build. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a little trick. You can do ng-build, but what I always like to do, and this really isn't so much a trick as a common practice, but if you've never seen it before, it's like really cool, is ng-build -- watch. Oop. Oh, oops. All right, and there you go. So that's what happens when you become overeager. All right, so make sure that you're first inside your application before you do this, but once you're inside your application, go ahead and type in ng-build -- watch. Now, what's exciting about ng-build -- watch is normally whenever you type, just ng-build, it will only build your file once. So it becomes kind of tedious because let's see, I'm just going to change something small here, and I'm going to do like a split screen so that you can see the terminal reacting as I am changing this. So I'm going to just change something. I'll explain what this is in a second. All right, so did you see how it rebuilt inside the terminal? So that's what you get when you add the -- watch flag. And that's highly useful. So I recommend that everybody don't just ng-build, ng-build -- watch. Now, to actually see the application, what you need is another command, and that command is called ng-serve. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Second. Okay, so let's open up a new one. All right, so once you're inside your application, once again, do ng-serve. And what this will do is this will go ahead and host this on your local machine. And what you can do is, once it's done, you can go ahead and go to localhost, in this case, 4200. Host 4200. And there you go, there's your application. Congratulations, everybody. So here's our application, and let me show you the cool thing. Now that since our application is currently building, and it's watching your application while you're changing, so it's building while you're changing things, you can actually look over here and watch as I change this title, and it will change it for me. So I'll go ahead and show you. So welcome to FCC OKC. And I'll save. And if that does, right there. There we go, welcome to FCC OKC. So that is actually really cool and really neat, because normally you have to go through and you have to hard refresh. So for me, that's kind of, I nerd out about that. All right, so next, let's go ahead and go to the next thing right here. Okay, so another really powerful part of the Angular CLI is the ng-generate command. So the Angular developers have made it so easy for you to create your application that I guess they decided that they were also going to make the components and everything for you. So what they have created is they have created this ability to, this command called generate, which allows you to type into your command line and create whatever type of, let me give you an example. You can create like a component, a module, a service, a pipe. That's not even all you can create. You can create directives, all different kinds of things. And I'm going to go ahead and explain what those are. But just so you get like a little intro, this is very, this is already done for you. So let me go ahead and create a component for you and show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and go into our application. So I'm going to have my application right here. I'm going to have my command line. And since I'm being lazy, I'm going to go ahead and open up the terminal inside the editor. I hate seeding into everything. All right, so let me go ahead and set this up. Okay, so ng generate and component. Now, you can say ng generate component, or, and this is the shorthand that I show in the other column, you can say ng gc, and I'm going to create a component, and I'm going to call it my list. All right, so what just happened? All right, so over here, if you look over at my, my Visual Studio code editor, or VS Code, you can see that I just had a new component, a brand new component, just kind of magically show up. What the Angular CLI has done is it has given me my HTML file, it's given me my CSS, it's given me my testing file, which we're not going to be using today, but they give you like a nice little start for your testing file, which is very much appreciated. And they give you your TS file. And all of this is already hooked up into your app module. So if you look over here, my list component has already been imported, and it's already been included in the declarations for this module. All right, now I just kind of threw some words at you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go into explaining what all those words mean. So let me go ahead and pull this up. Okay, all right, so some key concepts. Concept number one, components. All right, so let's go back to my folder here. All right, so this is a component. Whenever I created the component, I just said my list, but the Angular CLI is highly intelligent. Well, not really intelligent, but so it goes ahead and it appends the name component to it, and I have the ability to use that component wherever I like inside my main app. I can do that by including this tag right here, which is my selector for my component. I can just go in here. Let's see. I can, in this case, I'm going to take out their list because my list is better. And I'm going to add that. And let's see what happens to our app over here. Oh, look, my list works. So what have I done over here? Well, that kind of brings in the next concept. So let's go ahead and pull that one up. So the next concept is class decorators. All right. So over here, I have what is called a class decorator. This little at component is a class decorator. And what that is this is a class. And this is basically just metadata about that class component. And it tells that component, it tells it information about itself. So it tells it, hey, your name is at my list when it comes to using you in the HTML. So you're going to use this selector whenever you want to create an instance of it inside another HTML file. It also tells you where your CSS file is going to be. So here you have your style URL. You can have more than one of those. That's why it's an array. And here I'm pointing to this CSS document right here. So if I go ahead and I change something for whatever reason, let me just say, right now we just have a p tag, so I don't know, I'll just change the color. I'll say I want the color to be purple, because why not? Purple's awesome. And there you go. My list works is now purple. This decorator right here, is very powerful in that it links up this class component to all the other files that it needs to both instantiate itself and to give itself styling. This is my HTML. And here you can see this is my HTML template right here being called. You could also, I've debated bringing this up. It might confuse people. You can actually put a template in here directly. Like you can actually put, like H1, hi, I'm Fred. But mostly people don't do that because usually whenever you have an HTML file, you're going to have a lot more than hi, I'm Fred. So just use this method for now. The Angular CLI already assumes that you're going to have a lot more content than that. So go ahead and just use this method. I like these how it does it. It's highly encapsulated, and you keep all of the logic separated in the places that you need it to be. So don't have it all thrown together into one file. All right. So next concept is modules. All right, so I keep saying this word module. What is a module? All right, so a module, and for this app, since it's a simple app, we only have one module, so I'm going to go ahead and point you to that one. This is the main app module, and in the future, whenever you create other modules, you can go ahead and and link them up with this one. But the CLI will do that for you. But because today is such a basic introductory course, I'm just going to show you the main module. So here we have our module, and what it is it encapsulates all that your app really is. So here it tells you in your declarations, hey, this is what I'm made up of. I have an app component and I have a my list component. That's it. That's what declarations is, Then you have your imports, and imports you can take stuff from other modules. Your app module is really just what you need for your application. But in order to use your application inside a browser, you kind of need other things too. So Angular has already made modules like the forms module and browser module and et cetera. And these modules you can go ahead and call from the Angular library folder, so to speak, that's in your application, and you can get those files, that information that you need. Thankfully, Angular CLI does it for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So, hang with me here. I know it sounds kind of complicated. Next, we have TypeScript. All right. So I mentioned TypeScript earlier, and I want to kind of come around back to that topic. So here, instead of JS, my file ends in TS. So what's that about? All right, so let's go into TypeScript. Just the basics. All right, so what is TypeScript? TypeScript is a free and open source programming language developed and maintained by Microsoft. It is a strict syntactical superset of JavaScript and adds optional static typing to the language. It types stuff. So JavaScript is what is called a dynamically typed language. So what does that mean? That means that JavaScript kind of assumes, it makes its own assumptions about what the data that you're giving it, and it says, hey, I think you're a string, or hey, I think you're a number. Statically typed languages are much more strict than that. They don't assume you need to tell them. Since JavaScript is dynamically typed, there are some issues with it that some people don't like. TypeScript just kind of takes care of that. It makes JavaScript a little bit safer. It catches bugs at compile time rather than during runtime, which for JavaScript developers is a constant hassle, because if you have during runtime, sometimes they do a pretty good job of telling you when there's something wrong, but it doesn't always tell you, it doesn't pinpoint exactly where something's wrong. So sometimes, those runtime bugs can be a big pain. But with Angular, because they use TypeScript and they catch them at compile time, that takes a lot of that guesswork out. It'll point to where in the file and be like, this you have an error right here. I'm going to catch you. I'm not going to let your app run until you fix this problem, which is really neat and really cool. So let's go on into types, what you need to know. All right, so there are more types than this, but this is just the most common ones that you will run into. First, there is what's called a string. So a string is oftentimes just letters, but it could be a combination of of letters and numbers. In JavaScript, it just kind of assumes that if you have something and there's a character, like a letter in there, it's going to be a string. The next type would be Boolean. Boolean is true, false. Next type is number, and number is 1, 2, 3, 4. The next type is any, which is anything. This is the type that you're discouraged from using, but we all do it because sometimes you stare at your computer and you just are like, I just want you to work. And then the last type that I oftentimes use, again, these are not all the types. There's like tuples and enums and things like that. The last type that I use a lot is void. And I'll go ahead and give you some examples of each of these and explain that in a second. Go back. So first, let's explain string. So when I type the string, First what I do is I give it a variable name. So let's go over here. I'm going to go ahead and just create a random variable. I'm just going to say name, and I'm going to type it as a string. And I'm going to say Fred. So that's it. That's all I needed to do. I've just correctly used Typescript, guys. Thank you. Now, because you're inside the class component, Angular, you can actually just do this. You can just do this right here. It really does not get mad at you if you do that. I mean, well, my linter's getting mad at me. Oh, wait, no, that's because I have a duplicate identifier. But because you directly, it kind of treats it like I don't know, like a string literal kind of. It just, because you immediately instantiated it as a string, it's like, oh, I understand this is a string, but it's going to be strict with you. It's going to say, you know, okay, so let me go ahead and give you all right. Null. If I do that, this could literally be anything. This can be a string. This could be a number. You can change it into anything. If I say Fred, because I didn't actually strictly type this over here, it could also be turned into anything. You don't want that. You really don't want that. So just as a safety net, type it as a string. All right. Next is Boolean. So that's true, false. So you can do, you know, like I've got over here is active, colon, Boolean equals false, and that'll work. You can do for counting. So this is my count variable, colon, number equals 66. Null, you can actually, like I said, you can actually set any of those to, so let's do something. I'm going to show you an example here. Count. Oh, bad Megan. Although null is a type, I don't actually want to use it right now as a type. All right, so you can actually do that. You can actually type something as a number, but start it off as null. Because null is a special property in JavaScript that says that it's like a placeholder that the developer gives it and says, hey, I want you to be nothing right now. And you will always be nothing. No, no, that it's with the anticipation that it will turn into something, hopefully, you know. Cross fingers. Next, we have the void type. And the void type, I really only ever use in like silly functions where I'm doing something like I'm just console logging something. Let me explain what this is right here. Okay, so up above, I am just having, let me go ahead and make this bigger. Up above, I'm just typing my variables. But right here below, I'm doing something different. I'm doing something with a function. And what I'm doing is I'm actually typing the return value of the function. Again, if you're going to use Typescript, you can get away with putting any here. You could put any instead of void. You could put any instead of number. You could put any instead of Boolean. But in order to get that extra little oomph that Typescript can give you, if you strictly type, if you use the types that it gives you, is so much more valuable. And void gives you the option of saying, hey, I'm going to return nothing. I'm just gonna do something. So here you have the option of telling whatever you're going to return. So say instead of a console log, I wanted to return, okay, I just want to return 4. I mean, what type is that? That's a number, right? Well, I could tell it I want to return a number right here. Now, some people will probably look at that and say, you know, that's too much work. Why would I want to do that? Well, a lot of the times you're actually working with data that you're pulling in from another server, you know, from some endpoint. and you want to make sure that you're getting the right data. This is all about debugging, guys. That's what Typescript's about. This was created by people that have probably been a little frustrated with JavaScript for a long time, or just were like, hey, wouldn't it be better if they like a smarter way of doing this? So this is all you really need to know to get started with TypeScript and Angular. All right, so let's move on. The fun part. All right. Okay. Oh. All right, so big scary words are not so scary. All right, so the first concept I'm going to cover is what's called interpolation. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up our application again, and for the purposes of this one, I'm going to actually split pane this, so give me a second. All right. Okay. All right, so we already have some interpolation right here. So remember earlier when I changed the title, and suddenly the text that was next to welcome to changed? That's because we are using what is called interpolation. So Angular, what you can do, well, you can also do this in React, but in Angular what it does is you can reference a variable from your TypeScript file, and you can just interpolate it into the DOM directly. From wherever you use these little curly brackets. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to start fresh, and I'm going to just go ahead and do it like a fresh interpolation. So let me go into my list component that we already created, and next to my list works, I am going to interpolate a variable that doesn't exist yet, but will. And let's call that variable str for string. Why not? And inside my app.ts file, oh, not app.ts file, my list.ts file, I'm going to go ahead and create my string variable. So let's go ahead and say str, and then string equals my list works, booyah. All right, and let's go ahead and open up our app and see what's changed. Oh, look at that. Booyah. That's right. So string interpolation is very powerful, and you can actually do more than just interpolate it as a string. You can also interpolate it as an ID or something like that, which is highly useful. So say you're pulling in some data, an array that you have to iterate over, and you're trying to create, I don't know, 100 list items. But you don't want to just throw those list items onto the page. You want to kind of track them by giving them IDs, right? You want to give them unique IDs. So usually on that object, you're going to have some kind of unique ID or identifier. And what you can do is you can go ahead and interpolate that into the ID property. So let me go ahead and show you how you do that. So I'm just going to say inside the p tag, just a little tip right there from. Oh, just going to use curly brackets here. str. Okay. All right. Now, when I go back to my page and I go to inspect that p element, you will see that I have an ID of booyah. So if I ever try to reference this specific p tag using that ID, it will work. So that's a really nice thing too. All right, next concept. Let's go over here. Property binding. All right, so property binding. There's a lot you can do with property binding, and one of the ones that I don't ever really use, but is kind of fun to play with when you first start applications, is the actual ability to directly edit your styles of your HTML elements from outside of the HTML. And you don't even need to do it to your CSS. You can just do it in your TypeScript file, which can be really neat because obviously your logic is going to be inside your TS file. So if you wanted to change something based upon certain conditions, you can change them directly from the TS file for the HTML. So let me go ahead and just do a quick example. Let me go ahead. All right. So how do you like that? All right. Style.width. And like I said, I don't really use this very often, but it is kind of fun to play with. You can do color. You can do all different kinds of properties. You know, if it's accessible via the window object on the DOM, then you can edit it. If it's bound to the actual element. So let's go ahead and give it a variable, some kind of property from my TS file. So let's say width. I want it to reference the width. All right, so I'm in my list. Oh, save. So over here, I'm going to say width, and that's going to be a number. And I'm going to say the width should be 10 pixels. But since it's already referencing pixel, you just need to say 10. Because why not? You know, make them really read that paragraph, you know. All right. Oh, look at that. We have restricted the paragraph down to a width of 10 pixels. Let me go ahead and exit out of the tools. So that's just one of the things you could do. But the thing that I really use this for the most often are the ones that you see here. So hidden. Hidden is a really interesting property. You can actually hide. So you can actually hide your elements on the page, which is very useful. So say if you have a drop down and you have a down arrow and you want that down arrow to be an up arrow sometimes, you can just include both of those icons right next to each other. And whenever you're collapsing the drop down, you can have the up arrow one way, or when you're decollapsing it, or is that how you say it? Decollapsing? Yeah, thank you. Expanding, thank you. Or whenever you're expanding, you can have the arrow go the other way. And you could, I'll show you another method doing that in a second, but you could do like an ngIf, but I love to use the hidden property. So let me go ahead and show you the hidden property. So let me go ahead and take this out. All right, I'm just going to say hidden equals, and in this case, oh, I have a 0 there. I'm going to say is hidden, and save. Is hidden, and this is going to be a Boolean, so we're going to type it as a Boolean. And in this case, because we want it to be hidden, we're going to say true. So I've just saved that, and let's see what happened to our application. Oh! Looks like our link just disappeared. Wonder what happened there. See if I change it to false, what happens. And there it goes. It shows right back up. So that's something that's really fun to play with. Once we get to event binding, I'll show you a really cool way of flipping that Boolean so that you can hide it whenever you want to using a button. But real quick, go ahead and look here. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to kind of skip past these. But basically, what I wanted to say here was you can also manually set the value of like an input, which is what you most usually would use this for. You can set the value of an input to a specific value. And then you can also have properties that you have created yourselves. And oftentimes you'll use those with an at input, which is outside the scope of this. So I'm not going to go into it, but I just kind of want to mention that out there for you, that if you are going to pass data in between components. You can actually capture that data using property binding and using this @input function. So that will be highly useful. And let's go to event binding. All right, so event binding. All right, so what I have here are all native events that you can use to access your, you can access on your elements just from native JavaScript. But in Angular, how they access it is they do like this. You use event binding with these parentheses. So if you can kind of see, there's a little bit of trend here. Property binding, they use brackets. And event binding, they use parentheses, yeah, parens. So here, actually, I'm going to create a button for this. Why not, you know? Let's create a button. And I'm going to call this button, click me. And whenever this button is clicked, I'm going to have it flip that Boolean value that we gave it earlier. So let's go ahead and bind it to click. So I've just bound this element to this event, the click event, and now I'm going to give it a function. So this is going to be what we're going to execute when we click on this button. So I'm going to say on, or well, click handler, but I like to say on click. On click. So let's go ahead and add that function to our component. On click. Oh. It's actually really difficult to type whenever you're like this. All right. So whenever I click, I'm going to have it switch the Boolean. So I'm of is hidden. So I'm going to say this dot is hidden. And you have to say this dot because you're referencing a property that's already inside the class. So you are referencing this inside the class. If it was outside the class, it'd be a different story. But you're inside the class. So you need to reference this dot is hidden. So this dot is hidden equals, and you're going to say it's the opposite of what is hidden is currently. Did I write that correctly? Oh, yeah, this dot, thank you, yeah. This dot. Oh, capital I. All right. All right, no more. Okay, we're good. All right, so now let's go ahead and see what we've just done. So let's go ahead and go into our application, and I'm going to click the button. Thank you. Well, you know, what would I do without, you know, wonderful viewers like you? I mean, you know, it's not like I do this for a living, but. All right. Okay. Oh, there we go. Look at that. It disappears. Makes me so happy. All right. Now, that is just one of the cool things that you can do with event binding. You can bind to different kinds of events. So one of the things that you're going to see in the future is that these are the default events that you can bind to. But in the future, whenever you pass data upwards, so if you pass from, okay, so parent-child logic. So our app component is our parent. Our MyList component is the child. In the future, if you want to pass data up to the parent, you're going to have to you're going to have to emit an event. And when you do that, you can bind to that event using this kind of syntax. But that, once again, that's so far outside of beginner territory that I'm not, you know, we're gonna bypass that today. But just so you know, in the future, that is something that you can do with event binding. Next is directives, and I believe this is the last part, the last portion. So directives are really interesting in Angular. They give you the ability to do things like hide, well, in this case, have an element render or not render to the page. So here's some really useful ones. This one's ngIf, which is the one that I just kind of referenced, the one that allows you to have an element render or not render to the page. It's different from hidden in that hidden, the property already exists on the, well, not the property, the element already exists on the page, but you can hide it and unhide it. With ngIf, it just doesn't exist. Like, it's like if this property, so like right here, we'll have like this is a Boolean value, and this will be true or false. If show section is true, then yes, this element will exist on the page. If show section is false, this element will not exist on the page, meaning that if I went into my command tools and I tried to inspect my DOM and I tried to look for it, you cannot find it because it does not exist. It did not render. Another highly useful directive is ng4. And ng4, I'll go ahead and do, I have a little bit of time. I'll go ahead and do like a quick implementation of. So here, look, our list component. So remember when I said that you can, what you'll do a lot of the times is you'll iterate over an array of data and you'll render it to the page with LIs oftentimes. Well, this is one of those situations. So let me go ahead and I'm going to create an LI that I'm going to repeat over and over. And I'm going to say that this LI has a label of, I don't know, pet name. And I'm going to interpolate a name. I'm going to get that name from an array. So bear with me here while I type this out. It's going to be ng4 equals let name of names, or of pets, I guess, pets. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and explain what I'm trying to do here. So I'm going to create an array over here called pets. And you can type this as any array. Okay. And I'm going to, well, honestly, it's strings, so I'm going to say it's an array of strings. So let's go ahead and do that. Just go ahead and add that extra typing of safety. And I'm going to give it several names. So Rex, Tux, Julie. All right. So what you can do is, because this, so now that we've created this array inside of our TS file, what we can do is we can then bring it over here to our HTML, and we can say, for every one of these pets, so for every one of these pets, I'm going to let name equal one of those pets. I could name this anything I wanted, actually. I could name it let pet of pets, or I could name it let, let animal of pet, anything. You can literally name it anything you want to, or X, let X of pets. Let's go ahead and do that, just X. And what I'm trying to bring home to you is the fact that whatever you want to call this, you can call it anything you like, but what it will do is it's going to create a list of 3 LIs based upon this data from your array. So let me go ahead and show you that in our app. Okay, so there you go. Pet name, Rex, pet name Tux, pet name Julie. So that is that's very powerful. Say that my array wasn't just 3 items. Say that my array was 100 items. Now say that my array wasn't just 100 names. Say that my array was actually 100 person objects, and inside of each of those person objects was 30 keys. And say I was trying to create 100 profiles of all these people. You would be able to have the ability to, with a single line of code, render all of those LIs. So this is a highly powerful directive, and one that once again I'm very excited about, and I kind of nerd out about it. But one cool thing is, if in the future, like I said, if I had an object, I have 3 minutes, but why not? If I have an object here, and inside that object I have a name property, and I'm just going to say A, and then I have an age property, and that's going to be, like 2. So let me go ahead and copy and paste this and create this 3 times. It's going to be C, B, and B is going to be 5 years old. And you know what? C is going to be the same age as A. All right, now, whenever I go over here, what I can do is I can say name, and I can say x dot name, and then I can say age, and I can interpolate, I can interpolate x dot age. So let's go ahead and see what that did over here. It's mad at me because sorry. I'm sorry. I know I did that. That was bad. That was bad, Maegan. Yeah. Oh. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. I was like, what did I do? Oh, yeah. Because you have to. Now, here's something about Typescript that I wasn't going to go into too much today, but you can actually create your own custom types. So what you'll want to do is, in the future, instead of having just an any, what you'll want to do is you'll actually want to create your own type interface, or you'll want to create your own type of interface for your object. So you'll say, I'm going to have type person, and type person is going to have inside of it 2 properties. It's going to be name, it's going to be age, and it's going to type the name as a string and going to type the age as a number. So that's one really cool thing that you can do with Typescript. So once again, now whenever we go over here, look at that. Pet name and age are now currently there. So that's why they have Angular, folks. It makes your life so much easier. One line of code can do what they used to have to type out manually for every single line. So, well, nowadays you wouldn't have to do that. With vanilla, you could actually do it even better. But, just saying, a long time ago. So that's pretty much it that I have for today. What I have here is I have some learning resources for everybody. So the first is the Angular tutorial, which is, it's really good. You should take the tutorial. I love that the subject matter is Avengers. And then they have a blog. So if you go onto the blog, it can have some useful information. Next is the Angular CLI, which is so much more powerful than what we were able to cover today. And then the next is this little Angular cheat sheet, which has kind of saved my life. So this is each one of those. All right, well, that's it, folks. Thank you.